Hi guys, what if I tell you that one of the most commonly available spices, that is dry ginger, pepper, long pepper, can help you prevent, treat or even reverse diabetes, can help you manage with weight gain or obesity, and can also improve your heart health. Not just that, it can also substitute one of the modern medications for you. Doesn't all these seem like a tall claim? Are these even scientific? Now let us delve into this. For us to understand this, we need to know what is glycemic index. In a very simple way, to tell you what glycemic index is, let us say a certain food is consumed, and after the consumption of that food, there is immediate release of sugar into the body. Let's say a spoon of sugar itself. I take a spoon of sugar, it gets absorbed into the from the oral cavity, and it gets digested. So there is immediate release of glucose into the body. So this food has high glycemic index because there is immediate release of glucose into the body. Imagine another scenario where, let's say, I have an apple which has high fiber and which has natural sugars in it. Because after the consumption of this apple, the release of sugar is much slower than the spoon of sugar that I have had, right? The release of glucose is much slower, right? Now it means that the glycemic index of this apple is much lower than a spoon of sugar. Now we need to understand this because a food which is having high glycemic index is harmful for a diabetic, and it can cause diabetes if you are not a diabetic. And let's say a food is low glycemic index. It means that it can be consumed by a diabetic person, or by consumption of low glycemic index food, you can prevent yourself from becoming a diabetic. Now, why should we know this? When we are consuming a certain food, let's say a bowl of rice, which is thought to be pro-diabetic, which can cause diabetes because of its rich glycemic index, because of its high glycemic index. Let's say I add something to this rice so that its glycemic index comes down. Now, because of this, I can have any food in the world, even which is having high glycemic index. I add some ingredient to this high glycemic index, whereby it becomes low glycemic index. Now, it can be had by diabetics, and even after having that, I will not become a diabetic, right? Is that clear? Yeah. Now, there is a medicine called as acarbose by the modern medicine, which helps in preventing, or which helps in reducing this glycemic index. How does it do that? After consumption of any food, let us take the example of a bowl of rice. I have this bowl of rice. It is nothing but carbohydrates. These carbohydrates break down into saccharides and polysaccharides, and these saccharides and polysaccharides ultimately break down into glucose. This glucose is absorbed into the body. Very simple, right? Because the glucose is the fuel for the body. Now, what this acarbose does is that there is an enzyme called as alpha glucosidase. This acarbose prevents this alpha glucosidase from breaking down polysaccharides and oligosaccharides into glucose. Clear? Because of the prevention in this breakdown, the release of glucose into the body is slowed down or even prevented in many cases. Clear? I have this bowl of rice. I have a tablet of acarbose, imagine, and I consume this rice. After the consumption of rice, because of its prevention in breaking down of the sugar, the glucose which is formed is either delayed or even prevented. Right? Because of this, even a high glycemic index food has reduced its glycemic index because the release is much slower. Imagine there is a herb in Ayurveda which can do the same activity. Yes, trikatu or even dry ginger, pepper and long pepper can have a similar effect in your body. This is not told by me, but this is told by an article which was done in Thailand. I'll add the link for that article in the description. Now, what does this do? After the consumption of trikatu, what happens to our body is it prevents this alpha glycosidase enzyme from breaking down saccharides and polysaccharides into glucose, because of which the glycemic index is reduced in a certain food. This reduction in glycemic index is not just good for diabetes. Let's say a person is having lots of glucose, and this glucose is excess for the body. What the body essentially does is that it converts this glucose into lipid, and it stores it as fat in the body. So the cause for diabetes also is the consumption of high glycemic index food for a certain period of time constantly, right? Now this trikatu can not just prevent diabetes or even reverse diabetes if consumed at a regular pace along with the diet. It can also help you prevent and treat obesity or weight gain. And it is also found that it reduces the lipid levels to a great extent, because of which it is also helpful for your heart. Now, a very simple, humble herb in Ayurveda can have an effect similar to one of the most modern drugs in the system today. Then what else do you call a future science? That is the science called Ayurveda. Now, this Trikatu can cause gastritis if consumed in high quantities. So, before you consume Trikatu or before you start Trikatu, make sure you are consulting your physician. Thank you.